Welcome to the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast powered by Hiscox. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. Throughout my career, I've had side hustles, some of which have turned into real businesses. But first and foremost, I'm a serial technology entrepreneur. In the creator space, we hear plenty of advice on how to hustle harder and why you can sleep when you're dead. On this show, we ask new questions in hopes of getting new answers. Questions like, how can small businesses work smarter? How do you achieve balance between work and family? How can we redefine success in our businesses so that we don't burn out after year 3? Every week, I sit down with business founders at various stages of their side hustle to small business journey. These entrepreneurs are pushing the envelope while keeping their values. Keep listening for conversation, context, and camaraderie. Today's guest is Kathleen Minogue, the founder of Crowdfund Better, the leading crowdfunding education organization in the U.S. Kathleen is joining us from Boise, Idaho. Kathleen, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Sanjay. Glad to be here.
So I'm excited to have you on. I think you might be the first person from Boise, Idaho that we've ever had on this show. I'm trying to pull through my memory. I don't think we've had anybody else from Boise before. So hopefully you're the first of many, but I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your background and what got you to where you are today and what got you to Boise, Idaho, of all places.
Well, I'm happy to share that it's a long and winding road that I'll compress for sake of time. When I grew up in New York City in the outer boroughs. I was a creative kid, artsy, performing artist. All I wanted to do was be on Broadway. So how did I end up here? What I'd say is that I had no idea how important that creative background was to being an entrepreneur until I became one. So I started in theater. I also loved education, went to college, studied theater in a program that was student driven. So students designed, directed, they did every aspect of the production. And so I loved that. I loved being a director. I loved putting things together, creating something from nothing. Went on to be a teacher. And often I worked at independent schools who wouldn't hand me a curriculum. They'd hand me a stack of books as an English teacher and say, go for it. Again, creating something out of nothing. And I learned I had a knack for writing curriculum, for designing a learning path. So I worked in education, but I still had that passion for performance, got back into that, worked in nonprofits as you do when you're a performer, a lot of side hustle jobs. And I ended up during one of those side hustle jobs, temping at JP Morgan's investment bank. And I spent a couple weeks working with a managing director who said, I can teach you everything you need to know about finance, but you have what I can't teach, and offered me a job. And here I was, and I said, oh, well, this feels like a once in a lifetime. Like you just jump. You don't think, how did I end up here? And so there I was during the dot-com boom, working in finance of all things. But what I learned there was I saw who came in the door, who got funding. I was working sort of at the nexus of investment banking and venture capital. And they didn't look like me. Most of them were not women. And they didn't come from backgrounds, like mine, more of the creative performing artist background. And I said, well, how do things get funded? Long story short, I, got married, had a child, became a freelance copywriter. And then a friend of mine, a filmmaker, I had moved from New York to LA, asked me if I would help her produce her film. I never had produced a film. So you can see a theme here. Like, I've never done that before. Let me jump. And ended up using crowdfunding for her fundraising, for her campaign. It was about 2011, 2012, and no one was really aware of what it was. We didn't know what we were doing, but we put the campaign together, launched the campaign, funded the film. She went on to direct. And then people started asking me, how did you do that, Kathleen? And sort of the rest is history. I started helping mostly filmmakers and then moving into small business. And then there was a switch that turned and said, wait a minute, I'm an educator. I see so many people do not know they have the opportunity to raise funding without having to ask people for permission, not asking a VC, not asking a lender. And I used that curriculum writing and education background and even my performing background because I can stand in front of a room and speak. And that's sort of the nexus of sort of how I went from, I'm a creative kid and now I'm talking finance and crowdfunding.
Yeah. So was this the first time you had done, I mean, there's like themes of entrepreneurship in your background there, but was this the first time you've actually launched a business that was entrepreneurial in nature?
This was the first business. I think, as you said, as a creative, I've been making, something from nothing, taking an idea. If you're a creative, you have to make your own work. But this was the first time I had to learn the business side of that.
Yeah.
So, really get into, crazy things like, business plans and insurance and accounting, right? Like to really dig into the fundamentals and think about this as a longer term. And I'd say that's really the difference is with many of those other projects, they were short term. Right?
Yeah.
You get an idea, you do a project, you put it together. And this was like, how do you make something last, right? And grow over time. And it's been, now it's been 13 years since I started with that first project.
Yeah. There is a lot of non-exciting stuff that very pedestrian that is a part of entrepreneurship that, you don't necessarily consider when you're thinking about being an entrepreneur or you read about being an entrepreneur. Like nobody sits down and says like, yeah, I had to do my books today, right? Like nobody talks about that stuff, but it is the very necessary stuff that you have to figure out. So as you were starting this, was there anything that made you nervous about doing this that, you didn't know, or you were worried about not knowing?
I think part of it was I didn't know if I knew enough to sell my services, right? Like, did I have enough information? And the space that crowdfunding was at that 2011, 2012 up to, and on, it was evolving so fast. I didn't know if I could keep up and really stay competitive. But honestly, the anxiety was financial, right? Like, when people are crowdfunding, they're usually looking for money. So how willing are they going to be to pay you when they're in a position where they're looking for money? And so like, how do you overcome, that objection? Well, I'm looking for money. I'm not looking to spend money right now.
Right.
And so really finding the confidence to say, if you give me an hour, I'm going to save you 40. You're going to save 40 hours of, going through websites, trying to figure out what's what. I spend my day every day in this space. I've been there before. So I think the anxiety was, would someone be willing to pay me? And then also because it's not a repeat customer business, could I sustain it? Right? Like once people do a campaign, are they going to come back? Like am I always going to need to find a new customer every single time? And, that repeat business wasn't, something that was really in the business plan.
Right. Yeah. That sales funnel is the very, very critical thing. So how did you get over those things for yourself? So like thinking about it at the very beginning, when you're launching this, right? Like it's potentially going to take a while to get that first client in. And are they going to be willing to pay? How much are they going to be willing to pay? All of those things. How did you think about that for yourself? And how did you ensure that you would be okay?
Well, I'd say it stayed a side hustle for a long time. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay that I took the time to really understand before putting myself in a position where it had to support me completely. And it really was the introduction of the education piece. I was like, wait a second, there are tools here where if I can't get the customer back, how do I decrease the face time, the amount of my time that I have to, give to each client, so that I can have more clients.
Yeah.
So there was a different scale. And then how do I partner? So this was the other piece. Partner with others who have small businesses that they're working with. So I don't really have to go find the small businesses. How do I partner with people who have small businesses who are looking for capital? And so it's sort of they're doing the marketing, bringing the small businesses in. And then, we just bring this tool to that group of people.
Yeah. How long was it that you ran this as a side hustle before going all in?
So it was about, it was about 4 or 5 years before I jumped in.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really my choice to jump in. I'll just say, I lost my husband to cancer. And so I had to make a choice. Am I going to take this side hustle and try to make it into a full-time business? Or am I going to, wind this down and go find a full-time job? And I'm a little nutty this way. I was like, well, why don't I deal with grief and go start, move this business forward at the same time? But it was actually important, I think, to have this creative piece. I knew I was doing something also, the work in crowdfunding is often finding funding for folks who don't have a traditional path. And so it had real meaning. And so that was, part of the jump was, this is really meaningful. And so in a time when I, was a little bit I could use something for myself to find a who I am and why am I here, that provided me that piece.
That outlet that you needed
at
that moment in time. Is there, thinking back on the clients that you've helped, is there one that stands out as man, that was the most fun? That's the new bar. And you're always looking to, obviously you're always looking to overcome that bar with a new best. But right now, as you sit here, is there one that just stands out to you as it was either a lot of fun or you learned a lot because of it, or, whatever it is, it stands out to you?
The client, our clients are really focused on community. So, there are a lot of crowdfunding agencies that will help you raise $1 million. You're going to spend a lot on marketing. It's sort of a formula. My clients are folks who are more grounded in community. And so they're really looking to build their business with community, and then they nurture that community, and then they're able to turn to that community and to fund them. And no better example of this for us is Pioneer's Performance Streetwear. It is the only Black-owned running apparel company in the US, and it only exists because of the wherewithal of that founder and the community that showed up to help him fund the first manufacturing run using crowdfunding. And he raised his goal in a week with no paid advertising, with no,
wow.
It was all community generated. And, we helped him with the process of warming that community up and understanding how to structure the campaign to get that kind of response. And, he went on from there, winning, the Black Ambition Prize in Boston, and he became part of REI's Path Ahead Ventures, and his product got put into REI. And then most recently, he came back to us. So we did have, it was also,
there was a repeat. Yeah.
There was a repeat. And that's something that, crowdfunding is not something you just have to use once. He came back and said, I want to give my community the opportunity to invest in the business, to be owners with me. They helped me create it. So he launched a regulation crowdfunding, that's investment crowdfunding, where anyone, not just wealthy investors, can invest in your business. So he launched that campaign. And really it was for regular people, very focused. And he raised an oversubscribed $124,000, $500 at a time. And was able to allow his customers to become investors. And they've just struck up a partnership with Brooks Running to go to marathons. And
oh, wow.
So it's such an incredible story. But to go back to the beginning, he had invested everything he had in the prototyping, the design of this apparel. And he needed $35,000 to do that first manufacturing run. And so without that money, it would it have existed? He had sort of tapped every other avenue. And so that's exciting to me. When you say what's the one that gets you jazzed? It's the businesses that stay in business, right? That use this process. We have
Yeah.
a card game called Hella Awkward. They've been in business since 2020, started as a side hustle. They just got investment on Shark Tank at exactly the terms they asked for, right? Like these
Right.
stories live on, but
Right.
they have community at the heart. So if you ask
Yeah.
me, like, what are the stories I love? These are business owners who built their business with community. And then that community showed up, turned around and said, we love you. We want to support you. Take our money. Let's go.
Yeah. And it sounds like the things that you've done and kind of where you've gone with this is to be more of a coach than a manager of a campaign, like actually running the campaign. Why that decision to be more on that coaching education side than being on the tactical, like, let me run the campaign for you. I know how to do it.
It's a great question, Sanjay, because I've run my own campaign, so I know what it takes. Uh, and what we found is that, and that means you have to pay someone pretty well to be a campaign manager. But what if you're not raising hundreds of thousands of dollars? How do you justify spending $10,000 on a campaign manager and then paying them a percentage of that, and then, how much do you have? And so we found this whole group of people who were like, I want to do this on my own, but I just don't want to do it with, Google as my coach. I'd like a real person who has done it before, I can bounce ideas with. Many were solo entrepreneurs. And so they didn't have that balance with anyone in their community who understood crowdfunding. So for a while, we called ourselves the best friend in crowdfunding. So the decision was really to focus on a demographic that wanted to really put hustle over cash in terms of their investment in the campaign, but just didn't want to step in it, trip, fall on the way. And so our clients are those, really, they put a lot of sweat. Uh, and because I'm an educator, like underneath, that was a big piece of it. I knew how to do that. It was
Yeah.
intuitive to me.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a minute. You've got this background. You mentioned it. You wanted to be in theater. You've got this education background. How have those kind of shaped what you've built and how you've designed this coaching for these folks?
It's about storytelling, right? Crowdfunding. So, right, as a performer, as a writer, storytelling is in my wheelhouse. Um, but I'm always looking for ways to distill processes. So, how do you distill a process down into steps? Because what I encountered was that people got lost. It was so overwhelming. And so, the same way I would have introduced a student to writing a research paper, step by step by step, I looked at crowdfunding in the same way, right? How do you build a campaign step by step by step so that it's not this big overwhelming task? It's like, okay, do this today and that tomorrow. And then that, I look back at the work that I did, I put that there. And so that was a huge part of building our Crowdfund Better process, which is looking at what does someone need to be successful. They have to know what it is. They have to have a strategy. They might need some training and then get some support. And then we took a step back and realized that the people who were helping small business didn't understand crowdfunding. And so we've now built a training program for folks like your small business development center advisors, your economic development folks, so that they have the ability to help these small business owners and project creators right where they live in their community.
Yeah. Talk to me about the business now itself. You've been doing this now a number of years. How big is the team? Is it still just you? Do you have a team of folks, part-time, contractors, full-time? What do you got?
So I've got me and then my ops and then a team of people that we work with. Because what we get is so different, right? It's not always the same campaign, the size. I also have a huge referral network of folks in the industry who focus on specific niches. So people come in the door to us, we do some education and some strategy, and then it turns out that it's a great fit for one of my colleagues. So we like to say, start with us, and then if I'm not the right person, I will happily refer you to the right fit for what you want to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of that, is there like a big mistake that you see done over and over again with crowdfunding campaigns, like people trying to do, and like, what is that and how can they do better? or avoid that mistake?
What is the biggest mistake? The launching before they look. And by that, I really mean before they even look at other campaigns on that platform that are like theirs and learn from them, right? Like you don't have to come to me. You can learn from looking. But in that also is looking and realizing that it's not about funding. That's probably the biggest mistake. People think crowdfunding, they're like, oh, it's all about the funding. No, remember that first part of the word is called crowdfunding, right? And so, if we imagine that, your campaign is a camera on a tripod, people are like, oh, I got my project. I kind of know how crowdfunding works, but they forget about the third leg, which is who's going to back your campaign. And so they launch without having a network of folks, not understanding how to reach them, having systems in place, because these days you need to reach out to people 15 times before you get them to take action. So how are you going to do that at a sustainable level? So really thinking about the who and not just the dollar sign.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So let's talk about one thing that kind of strikes me a little bit. So I've never done a crowdfunding campaign, but I imagine if I were to do one, you'd probably be on the page all the time, hitting refresh, trying to see, where's it at now? Do you have this inclination, like you yourself with your clients? How do you control that? How do you think about that? How do you make sure that you don't become obsessed with what that number's at?
Oh, trust me. When I had my own campaign, it is very difficult and not to be that way. And we've definitely been roller coaster rides with clients. It's having a plan.
Mm.
That's the most important thing, because you're going to run that plan no matter what is happening. And that's the other thing people don't realize. It goes into a trough often in the middle. You get like a peak at the beginning where it's very exciting. And then there's a big push at the end. But what most people don't understand is it's what you do in the middle when not much is happening that creates that second push, that finds that person, that gets you that press coverage. It's while you think nothing is happening. So the most important thing is to work your plan for the campaign, to have a day-to-day plan. That's the other big mistake is, I launched the campaign. Well, what's your plan for tomorrow? I don't know. Right?
I thought we were going to be done today.
I thought we were going to fund it. So how, you have to have a plan. And, as tempting as it is, hitting refresh is not going to bring new people to the campaign. It's not going to bring new people to the campaign. So do your plan. And then, once you've done what you're supposed to do, then hit refresh. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about boundaries because, when these campaigns are running, obviously they're running from a certain start to a certain end. And for the people that you're coaching, there's going to be times that they're panicking at random times of the day and night. How do you set boundaries for yourself and for your clients to make sure that you maintain a life and it's not you're thinking about these crowdfunding campaigns all the time?
When I started, it was really difficult, right? Because my success was their success in so many ways. And one of the things that people wanted to text me. And so I made a really hard and fast rule. And people think I'm nuts. I was like, you email me, because if you text me every single time, my phone is going to ding. And, and I can't really track it. It's gone, right? Even, they would often want me to go on their communication channels, like join my Slack. I was like, but that's your Slack. And now I'm going to track your Slack and your Slack and your Slack, so saying like, these are my preferred communication channels. And really asking clients to respect that, because an email, I might be up at 2 a.m. and want to respond to you, but that's my choice to respond at 2 a.m., right? Not to have a text message, going, ding in the middle of the night. And so it's worked out pretty well because we're very responsive. But because we want to be a part of the process. But it's also why I've moved more to the education side and less to the coaching side.
Right.
Because as you start working with more people, there's a couple ways to scale, right? You can grow your staff, or you can build tools that you can use so that, they're working through the process and you're providing feedback. You're not running alongside, you're just checking in. And so that's really where Crowdfund Better has gone to is, we have a process, we have online courses, we have a roadmap process. So, we can touch at the critical moments, but not have to be running alongside the whole time.
Right. So it sounds like you've kind of figured out, at least for now, what things work in terms of the business. But let's take a look back and think about the things that you've done over the last however many years, be it the full-time segment or including when this was a side hustle. Is there something that stands out to you like, oh, knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time and do that over again, I'd do it this way? Well, what is that it clearly looks like it? There's probably a long list, but give me just, one or two that you definitely want to go back and do differently. Oh, okay.
There's one specific. A lot of people told me I wasn't marketing enough. That's why I didn't have enough customers. And so I invested some serious cash into a huge marketing push, only to realize that wasn't, I didn't believe that was what it was. And my belief was the more I stood up in front of a room and talked to entrepreneurs, because of my special skills as a performer, as a teacher, right? Like, it was about getting me in front of the entrepreneurs and getting me in front of the advisors. Like, that was the sales point, not digital marketing. And I was so right about it. And I won't take it back, because I know now that I don't have to worry about that. But, the getting in front of people generates sales for me. The relationship generates sales. And so, if I could say something to someone, is like, trust your heart sometimes. Like, I know that, you read all these things online and here's all these ways to do things, but sometimes you just have to know how you feel comfortable in the world. And so, I do that with my clients all the time, and I kind of missed the boat there for myself. So, learning experience.
It's interesting. I see a lot of entrepreneurs that try to do some of these things with digital marketing in the early days. And they lose that relationship opportunity or that connection with the customer that would help inform them about their business, right? They try to take that shortcut. That shortcut, I think, is a good shortcut as you're trying to scale. But when those early days are happening, I think you've really got to be one with the customer and build that relationship and that rapport. Is that something that, like, thinking about the crowdfunding campaign, it sounds like, you focus so much on the crowd, like it's really about that relationship. Are there any things that you advise people to do to help them build up those relationships and those kinds of connections into those communities that will support them?
Absolutely. And even with social and digital marketing, one of the things we see is a lack of consistency. So, being where you're going to be with regularity creates trust. And so we have a lot of small business owners who are like, posting here and posting there, and they're not sending any newsletters, no emails, like there's no system in place. And so, relationship is about trust, and trust is built. What I say a lot is, digital moves it faster, but human relationships happen in human time. And so you don't get married usually the first time you meet someone, right? There's usually a courting, dating, things evolve. And it's no different than, working your way into a sale with a customer. And the bigger your ask, the deeper that relationship needs to be. So, when you're talking about, a $50 pre-purchase for a rewards crowdfunding campaign, say on like Kickstarter, it's a different depth of relationship than if you're talking about asking people to invest $1,000 in your startup using investment crowdfunding. So,
right.
What is that? And And there's a humanity that I tell people, get out there to events. It's so important. Like you were just saying, Sanjay, that face to face.
Yeah.
People want to know the person who is behind this company. Sometimes I see campaigns and there's no face of the founder. And it bothers me because I want to know the person. I've worked with enough, startups and small businesses to know the character of the company is really driven by that founder. So I want to know who they are. And ultimately, what we say is when you're starting your business, you are bigger than your brand. So it's all about you getting out there. Once you have that business and it's starting to, develop, then your brand becomes bigger than you, and people, don't necessarily, know who the CEO is. But when you're starting, you are bigger than your brand.
Yep, exactly. Okay, last question for you, Kathleen. If you were talking to somebody who's thinking about taking that leap and launching a side hustle, or taking that side hustle and making it a full-time business like you did, what's the advice you would give to them?
I want to be in the positive here. Be sure you're ready. If you're going to move from a side hustle to a full-time, don't let anyone else tell you when that is. You make that decision. Some people shame people for, you're not serious about your business if you don't quit your day job. Some people's lives are complicated. I'm a single mom. I can't not earn. So don't let anyone tell you when that time is. Really trust yourself to know when you're comfortable. I mean, don't wait forever, but if you have true financial, concerns, then hang on a little bit and you'll be okay.
Yeah. Great advice, Kathleen. Where can our listeners find and connect with you online?
Crowdfundbetter.com is our website. You can find me on LinkedIn, reach out, say hello. We've got Instagram, YouTube, where you want. We also have a whole learning center, which is, learn.crowdfundbetter.com. So, we've got courses that are really well priced. That is one of the things that, we're proud about, is that we can help people, and, even people who don't think they have the means to learn.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on the show today, Kathleen.
Thanks, Sanjay.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast, powered by Hiscox. To learn more about how Hiscox can help protect your small business through intelligent insurance solutions, visit hiscox.com. And to hear more Side Hustle to Small Business stories or share your own story, visit hiscox.com/side hustle to small business. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. You can find more about me at my website, sanjayparekh.com.